Peter joins us now, and as you see by the picture, it features an interview with Dr. Anthony Fauci, the leading voice in the science world on this around the U.S. Peter, you did the interview with Dr. Fauci from what I read on Saturday. A little bit later Saturday, we found out that he was going under some form of self-isolation after being exposed to the virus there within the White House. Did you know that at the time that you spoke to Dr. Fauci?
No, I talked to him about 5:30, and maybe about 6:30, I was sitting down to dinner with my wife, and I saw in the evening news that he had self-isolated. So I didn't know that, but I do have his cell phone, so I did write to him almost immediately and told him I hope he's okay. And he's a nice guy trying to make his way through this and just trying to educate people as much as he can.
And Peter, he's also a sports fan. It's been chronicled as the profiles have been done. He was an athlete, a basketball player as he was growing up. So Peter, he has a real good sense for what conversation we're all having about when can sports come back. What was your number one takeaway from what he had to say about the National Football League season?
You know, that everything is a mystery. And I think, Mike, and I'll just interrupt that answer with this point, that an NFL general manager texted me over the weekend and basically talked about the lengths to which they are going to be going to sanitize and keep their facility basically hygienically pristine. And I told him about my conversation with Fauci. And I basically said, listen, I don't think people have an idea of what is at stake right now. Because as Fauci said, and I'm sure that the NFL is going to agree to this, if 4 players test positive on a Saturday night, that team is not going to be able to play the next day. I mean, they're going to have to call the game off, because how would you like to be a player on the other team knowing that, okay, 4 tested positive today, but there's a very good chance that it isn't only 4 that will test positive tomorrow or the next day. And so I think that's one of the things I learned from him. And the other thing is that he said, listen, we are going to have to let the virus make a lot of these decisions. And what he means by that is, you got to be dictated to by the virus. If the second wave of this virus, as he and other epidemiologists, scientists have predicted, is coming in the fall or winter, it'd be very easy if the infections in New York, New Jersey, and Illinois, and wherever there are NFL franchises are way, way down, or maybe even down to practically zero. It'd be very easy to say, that's great, it's over. But there almost certainly will be a second wave of this in the late fall. So people can't get too comfortable, even if, say, they're starting to let 20 or 30,000 people in stadiums at games.
And the Miami Dolphins have talked a little bit about what it might look like to have a limited number of fans in the stands, but almost everyone in the sports world who's not doing a budget seems to be okay with, let's get back to games first, and then we'll worry about the fan component later. Peter, we haven't heard a lot from Dr. Fauci as those White House briefings have tailed off over the last week with the experts being there. But I'm very curious at the one answer that I thought stuck out the most in terms of getting to a football season. And it comes back to the same thing Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx have been saying at that podium in the White House press briefing room for almost months now. Testing, testing, testing. And he was very clear with you about how important expanded testing will be to even think about having a football season on a normal schedule.
Yeah, and as I said to him, I said, Dr. Fauci, I have tried to put pen to paper, and if you test every player twice a week through the season and other essential members of that organization, coaching staff, medical people, security people, the people who are urgently required to help you put on a game, if you tested those people, everyone, say twice a week for the full season, we're talking about probably taking up about 200,000 tests, over the course of the football season. And I said, does that seem a little piggish to you? And he said, because of obviously the rest of the country needs the testing. And he said, well, right now it certainly would be piggish. But by the time we get to the season, say 3 months from now, when you're going to have to be into significant heavy testing, if there is going to be anything like a training camp, if you're going to do that, then essentially what you're going to have to do is have massive testing at least twice a week, I would say. And he says that would be urgently important for the NFL to test players. He doesn't think once a week is enough. And from what I know, I don't think so either. And so, that's why it is so important. The hygiene at these facilities and what players do when they leave the facilities.
Yes. That's why the multiple testing during the week is going to be out there. And, this is public health, but there's also a public relations piece. We saw that when Utah Jazz players were able to be tested right away in Oklahoma City the night of the Rudy Gobert positive test. I would throw out there that for any of the sports leagues that are thinking about this, one way to answer the public relations question, if you have to buy X number of tests for your team and all the people Peter just mentioned, maybe you get the same number of tests for your city and donate those to your city. And teams have been great in helping out their communities. They've been fabulous in donations. Perhaps if you can acquire a test for your city or for an underserved part of your city equal to the number of tests for your team, that may answer the public relations question, as you said, piggish, the word you used in the article, of we're getting tests for the team. Is it the elite just getting access to the test? You can put a hand out and help the community as well. We'll see if that plays out. Peter, I wanted to hit you on the schedule, because usually this week you've got some great nuggets from Howard Katz, Mike North, the rest of the schedule makers of the National Football League. You didn't have that aspect yet, Dr. Fauci instead this year, but you picked out a couple of key spots on the schedule, including one NFL date that, if this whole thing stays on schedule, is the date that you've decided it's going to be the easy chair and take in as good a Sunday as we could have in the NFL season.
In my opinion, if you look at week 13 of this year, Mike, and I'm checking it right now, but you've got so many excellent games, and I love that day. But the day I love the most, and the day I'd love to take off, is October 25. Because at 1 o'clock,
right,
you got Brady versus Teddy Bridgewater, and you've got Steelers Ravens. In the late window, you got Patriots, Chiefs, and you've got Kansas City and Denver. And then at night, you got Tom Brady at John Gruden. And, John Gruden wanted Tom Brady so much. You got Tom Brady on the Strip in Vegas. I hope that if there's any way there can be some fans in that game, because to me, the people in Las Vegas, for what they have been through, I would love to see them be able to see, most likely, Tom Brady's only game ever in Allegiant Stadium.
Right. And they have 4 primetime games scheduled. You also made an interesting point that if we do get to a league without fans, at least at the start, perhaps pushing the deadline back for flexing games could be something of a more feasible conversation, because you wouldn't be inconveniencing fans if they're not in the building, depending on how we get the season started in terms of the attendance in person.
Mike, other than what I was told over the weekend, the only thing that might really stand in the way of this is some team charters. Okay, because right now, teams have to set up their charters weeks in advance. But in my opinion, probably the only benefit of not having fans is I think it's going to allow Roger Goodell, Howard Katz, and the football people, obviously at NBC, to be able to discuss. Okay, look, we got Team X versus Y. We could have one of the games of the year with Team B versus C. Do we want to do that? And so I don't see any issue whatsoever. And it's not a league rule, Mike. It's just something that, that the owners basically have given Roger Goodell the power to do this. And I think for 1 year and 1 year only, an unusual year, my guess is that the owners would say it's okay. Mike, especially because after this season is going to be when the negotiations get serious for the new television contract. And the NFL is going to want to max out the ratings as much as possible in 2020.
It's an interesting conversation. That plus some great stories about the legendary all-time winningest coach in NFL history, Don Shula, and a little behind the scenes at what the Seattle tight end meeting looks in the virtual world, all part of Peter King's Football Morning in America. We can't give you the whole column here, so you have to go to NBCSports.com to check that out.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.